existing work processes will get modified. They will change. They will have to adapt. They will need to evolve. Right? We had a simple post which said, "Get pregnant in Vashi." Right? Now that itself is going to hold a lot of eyeballs, attract a lot of eyeballs, and attract a lot of attention.
Why do companies make fake promises? On the contrary, why is it important to deliver on commitments? Also, what kind of jobs will AI impact and what to do about it? How DLF grew threefold during COVID days? How art fertility is helping people deal with pregnancy? Today, we are discussing all of that with Karan Kumar, who was CMO for DLF and Fab India earlier and is right now heading growth and marketing for art fertility globally. He has over 2 decades of experience. This episode is one of the most ideal discussions around not just building a business, but also sustainable business, which calls for business ethics. Watch till the end. But also one last bit. It would mean a lot to me if you could subscribe to Goventure channel at this point. Hey Karan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Pritesh. Lovely to be here.
So Karan, I want to start with an example of a particularly challenging marketing campaign or a strategy that you have worked on.
Every marketing campaign and every strategy, honestly, is challenging. I think it was challenging to create the category of branded packaged atta when atta was treated to be a commodity. It was challenging to create a brand for student notebooks when student notebooks were considered as again a commodity. 10 रुपए की सिंगल लाइन नोटबुक दे दो भैया वर्सेस क्लासमेट की सिंगल लाइन नोटबुक दे दो मुझे. It was difficult and challenging to sell, a 50,000 rupee blazer to a consumer in Will's lifestyle. It was very, very difficult to sell a 75 crore apartment while I was at DLF to super high net worth individuals. It is very difficult to sell fertility treatments to patients, to people who lost hope and are in despair when it comes to pregnancy. So I guess each one of these are very, very unique challenges, and each one of them require a certain specific campaign to be created. Uh, what I will say is that while you speak to various audiences across various age groups, across various genders, sometimes children, sometimes grown ups, sometimes married couples, sometimes unmarried people, at the heart of every communication, at the heart of every campaign, you should keep in mind that you need to be speaking as honestly, as empathetically as you can, and you need to be making only promises that you can keep, because that is the only way to earn a certain degree of trust with the consumers or the audiences that you engage with. That itself can pose a whole lot of challenges because we live in an environment where there's a lot of hyperbole and a lot of claims being made by a lot of competing brands in each one of these categories. So I think the greatest challenge that you face is to keep your promise as honest and truthful and your language as compelling as you can, customizing it to the various audience sets you're trying to, you know, you're trying to address at any given point of time.
Does that do you think, Karan, that holds relevance in a world today where there are 3 second hooks and catchy phrases and all of that has become more and more popular compared to substance?
So the 3 second hook and the catchy substances is basically to get somebody to hook on to you, for you to deliver the larger message, which is obviously longer than 3 seconds. So I'm completely okay with 3 second hooks. You can treat the message in a manner where the first 3 seconds delivers a certain shock or delivers a certain manner in which it's delivered, which ensures that the person continues to stay with the message beyond 3 seconds. But at the core of what you're communicating, the truth, honesty, authenticity of that message cannot be lost. So I can make a statement, I can tune the delivery of that statement in a certain manner which gets your attention hooked in the first 3 seconds, but the core and the substance of the statement cannot be, should not ever be anything but anchored in truth and honesty.
Can you maybe give an example of a campaign where probably you were able to hook, maybe you can, if you can recall, were able to hook in the first few seconds or in the initial few bits and then probably deliver a message, a packed message?
Something we did very recently with art fertility clinics, opening a new satellite clinic in Vashi, in Mumbai. We had a simple post which said, "Get pregnant in Vashi," right? Now, that itself is going to hold a lot of eyeballs, attract a lot of eyeballs, and attract a lot of attention. Because you don't normally see a message like that. Get pregnant in Vashi and BKC. BKC is the other clinic that we have.
Mhm.
That attracts attention, that arrests attention. But thereafter, the message, as I said, what we do, how we do, what is our claimed success rates, how we achieve that, all of that is 120% created out of truth and honesty.
And if I look at your career, you have switched multiple industries over the last 2 decades, from FMCG to fashion and lifestyle to retail, real estate, and to healthcare now, right? And throughout your diverse career spanning different industries, what are some of the most significant differences you encountered in terms of marketing strategies and customer engagement? And also, what remained the same?
Sorry, what was the last part? What is the rebate?
So, I want to understand what remained the same and what are the
What
differences
remains the
between,
same? Yeah. I think what remains the same is, insofar as I'm concerned, is very clear. The commitment of a brand custodian, or for that matter, a business, to authenticity, truth, so that you earn trust. Yeah. Whether you're selling a 50 paisa candy to a small child, or whether you're selling notebooks to a growing student, whether you're selling apartments ranging from 5 lakhs to 75 crores to various sets of people, various demographics, various psychographics, whether you're selling healthcare treatments. I think what needs to always remain the same, and I can't harp enough about this, is honesty and truthfulness. Don't confuse that with the tonality of message. The message delivery tonality can always change. It could be humorous, it could be funny, it could be serious, it could be in long form, it could be in short form. But essentially, the substance of the message has to be honest and truthful. What, of course, changes is that depending on which demographic you are positioning your message to, your language will change. What they'd like to hear and how they would like to hear it will change. Somebody in Delhi would want to hear that message in a different manner versus somebody in Chennai, versus somebody in Mumbai, versus somebody in Maharashtra, in Calcutta. So your crafting of the message changes, your delivery of the message changes by audience and geography. Also, keep in mind that there are various industries. As you said, I've spent about 22 years across various businesses. Uh, I think my last count was some 7 or 8 completely different, unrelated categories. Each category is at its own different life cycle in terms of evolution. Some categories and some industries are more evolved in terms of communications and their marketing. Some slightly lesser so. So I think you
can
need
you give an
to,
example maybe?
for example, there's a lot of brand building that uh, has traditionally happened in the FMCG packaged foods kind of a space, right? But let's say in real estate, traditionally it's been a very transaction related interaction. I want to sell you
Hmm.
this particular house. Take this house. It will cost you so and so, and that's the end of the conversation. Similarly, in healthcare, traditionally conversations have been very, very product and service specific, not necessarily, talking about the fundamental needs from where the audience is coming in. So it's been a more inside out communication rather than an outside in approach. I think some of that needs to change.
Hmm.
Um, and that essentially is where your experience across various categories comes handy. you've having worked across various categories and industries, you know what kind of a marketing mix or a tone of voice has worked where, and if you find that to be absent in another industry that you've gone into, you try and incorporate your learning from your experience to make your entire marketing approach, communication approach more differentiated vis-a-vis the rest of the category.
So I think we talked about Karan, different kind of communication and maturity across different industries, uh, and adapting the different strategies according to that. But why do you think different kind of communication maturity exists across industries? Why do you think, say, real estate is still very transactional heavy and not very, say, promotional heavy?
Pritesh, honestly, that's not a very easy answer to give because, given the fact that I've worked across some 7 or 8 industries, the answer in each case is very different. But fundamentally, what I will say is if I was to hazard a summary, it would be that various industries come from various life cycles. In some cases, the life cycle of the transaction and the life cycle of a repeat transaction is more amenable to a continued engagement versus a once off engagement. I'll give you an example. For example, if you're selling a pack of biscuits or you're selling a pack of chips, you know, you know that the 10 rupee pack will be bought repeatedly over and over again over, the coming weeks or the coming months or the coming years, right? So there is a separate kind of an engagement, which is an ongoing engagement, which happens when something like that happens, when you're dealing with a category like that. If you're dealing with a category like real estate, in most cases, people will buy a house once in their lifetime, right? So your motivations of continued post transaction engagement actually drop in a lot of cases across the industry. You say मेरा काम यहाँ तक है, बेचने का है, बेचने के बाद I'm probably not going to see the same customer again. Let's move on. So your entire perspective of how you look at audiences and customers, how you deal with them, how you want to construct relationships, some more long term than the others, changes depending on the lens of the category that you're looking at, right? Um, Take an example of Fab India. It's another place where I worked. Now, within Fab India itself, we sold kurtas, which we knew would be bought, let's say, once every 5 to 6 months on an average, depending on season change. We sold organic tea, which we knew would be bought once every 10 to 15 days, depending on when the current pack would get over. And we sold sofas or furniture, which we knew is going to be bought probably once every 3 to 5 years and not before that. Now, within the same brand, you have three different product categories, and there were more, but I'm giving examples of three product categories which require a different kind of an engagement. It also requires a different kind of the engagement depending on the ticket value that you're pitching. Now, you're pitching a 75 rupee box of tea bags versus, let's say, a 2000 rupee kurta versus, let's say, a 35,000 rupee sofa. Yeah. Now, in each one of these areas, the person on the other side, which is the customer, has a different expectation of what he or she wants to hear, which will make which will make him or her convinced about the decision making process. Yeah. So communications change, motivations behind communications change, depending of the product life cycle, depending on ticket value, depending on the repeat purchase frequency of various brands across various categories. As I said, it's a difficult question to answer, but the answer to this will typically range and differ from one industry to the other. And therefore, I think when you come across from the point of view of having worked across 3 or 4 industries to a fifth industry, you come with yourself with the kind of experience you come because you've seen a lot of different scenarios play out in the past, and you're in a position to then figure out which one of those scenarios could a be used as is in this new industry that you work, or can be used as a combination of a couple of industries, learning from a couple of industries to create a new option for the new sector that you worked in.
Got it. Got it. And I want to come back to your multiple stints as CMO at multiple companies now, and I want to understand some of the craziest experiences that you have had in your past multiple stints as CMO at various companies.
I think the most fundamental set of experiences that I had earlier on in my career was working with ITC, where I worked for almost 16 years. And I think in ITC, I was working with a set of businesses which were mature. And also, I happened to join back in 2001 around a time when ITC was foraying into a lot of new FMCG businesses for the first time. So, a lot of new businesses which were absolutely nascent and fledgling. In fact, a lot of new businesses were born in front of me. And I was a part of the team that kind of created and curated some of those businesses. And yet, there was a combination of businesses that were legacy, mature businesses. Uh, the learnings that you get in both these environments of the life cycle of where the business stands are very very different and tremendous, right? So I think how to how to create, how to design, create, execute a new business, and shepherd it towards financial health is a completely different journey vis-a-vis working for a business that's been around for 80 years and is already profitable, right? I think that's one set of experience and one set of learnings which was tremendously rewarding. After ITC, I joined Fab India, and there the real experience was about how it was to work with a different corporate ownership governance structure altogether, very different from ITC. Suddenly working with an owner-led or a co-founder-led, promoter-led organization, which had venture capitalists invested in it. So the entire experience of having worked with ITC for 16 years, where you're used to various boards and levels of governance, and one tier and a second tier and a third tier, with all the SOPs laid out, very very rigorous audit procedures, to an environment which was very very different from that, was I think a fantastic opportunity again um, to kind of come to terms with. Make no mistake about the fact that if the organization was owner led, it was lacking on some of those discipline areas. No, it wasn't. It's just that organizations which are promoter led operate and behave very differently to organizations which are structured with three or four levels of corporate governance. DLF was another fantastic opportunity because, again, while it was promoter led, it also had a very, very strong and a fiercely independent board. So here there was a combination of something which was, almost like a combination or a crossover between Fab India and ITC. Also much larger in size and scale. It continues to remain the largest company by market cap in real estate in India. So fabulous experience, and the experience that I joined DLF, and after 3 months, COVID was declared. Right, so I joined in December, and March was the first wave of COVID, and I spent almost 30 months, or 2.5 to 3 years in DLF. How we dealt with the entire COVID situation, how within those 30 odd months we did 30 odd new launches when everybody was dealing with a great environment of uncertainty. How DLF at a revenue level from the residential business was at about 2,500 crores when I joined the company. And we together as a team made it reach 7,500 crores in that matter of 3 years, right through the three phases of COVID. I think that was a brilliant opportunity to both prove one's capability as well as learn a whole lot of new skill sets, especially skill sets that you need to deal with uncertainty. And thereafter now, with art fertility clinics, it's a group that specializes in fertility management, reproductive health, IVF treatments, based out of Abu Dhabi, opened in Abu Dhabi as far back as 2015, um, has 6 clinics in India, and in the India clinics are less than 2 years old. Different cycle of their growth and their maturity vis-a-vis the Middle East clinics. And here I head the entire marketing and the growth piece for the group, both the international presence as well as the India presence, which is a very different which is a very different experience altogether because you're dealing with multicultural people. You're dealing with very, very diverse cultures, both in India and in the Middle East, and you're dealing with very, very different sets of employees who come from, especially in the Middle East, who come from various international backgrounds, whether it's people from Colombia or people from Spain or people from the Middle East itself, people from Germany, people from America, so on and so forth. And that I think is a great cultural immersion for me as an
Mhm.
individual. Besides handling the business marketing and the business growth for the group. So yeah, different opportunities, different kind of learnings.
I want to come back to your pandemic days. I can see that you have had a crazy journey across multiple companies so far. But your pandemic days were spent mostly with DLF. You were the CMO of DLF during the COVID. How did COVID-19 pandemic shape your approach to marketing and sales in the real estate industry? And what strategies did you implement to adapt to the changing landscape?
Very, very interesting question, and a question that I honestly be very proud in answering because at the beginning of this conversation, I was emphasizing on the need for trust, right?
Mhm.
And how it's important for every business to foster that relationship of trust with its consumers and audiences. And real estate, in particular, is one of those sectors where traditionally a lot of brands have not been trusted by their customers for all the right reasons, for how those brands and businesses have let down their customers. Now, in contrast, DLF was a shining star, is a shining star, where the brand always delivered a little extra beyond what was promised. That being said, if you were to look at real estate, in real estate, given that your ticket values are typically very, very high, and for most of us, we make a single transaction in our lives and don't keep buying and selling homes. The need for trust is also manifested in the need to physically meet people, physically meet the sales guys, physically experience the product under construction, physically stand at the site, and see and experience the bricks and the walls and the quality of construction before you make your choice. Yeah. With COVID, especially in the first phase, where nobody really realized what the hell was happening, none of this was possible, right? There was, if you remember, there was a complete lockdown. Traffic was stopped on the roads. It was almost like a curfew kind of situation.
Mhm.
You could leave your house only if you had a medical emergency and go straight to the hospital and come back, so on and so forth. Now, imagine this kind of a situation playing out for a product category where purchase was always happening based on interpersonal physical interactions. I used to come and have and sit down with you and have a cup of tea with you. You used to offer me biscuits. You used to open out a brochure on the table, take me through the floor plans. Then you used to, almost walk me
Mhm.
to where the project was and make me look at the construction, make me see the workers working, give me a sense of confidence that the project is doing well, everything's under control, and then take me through probably a sales gallery or a demonstration gallery where the end project, how it would look like, what all features it would have would be there. And then finally we used to shake hands, actually physically touch each other and shake hands, and and thereafter maybe write off a check, right? Now
Mhm.
all of this changed in COVID, right? The most expensive transaction that you would make in your life, suddenly you had to make it without actually physically being there where the product is, without physically meeting the person who's selling it to you, without physically looking into the eyes of the guy or shaking the hands of the guy or the lady who's going to be a relationship manager. So, in this kind of an environment, and in an industry which was in any case grappling with lack of trust, making transactions was extremely, extremely difficult. The other side was look at it from the employee point of view. This perspective I've given from a customer point of view. Now, from an employee point of view, even the most seasoned sales manager who was 20 years, 30 years of experience. How was he or she used to selling? He or she was also used to selling by meeting you physically and sitting across the table and having a cup of tea with you. Now, his entire
Hmm.
skill set that was built over 20 years, 30 years has suddenly come to a complete waste because physical meetings are not happening. And you're expecting people
Hmm.
now to sell over Zoom presentations. And truth be told, at that point of time, if you're in your mid 40s and as a sales manager for a real estate group, you've never really dealt with things like Zoom. Maybe you've done some Skype calls with your children if they're studying abroad, or maybe you've done some WhatsApp calls, but making presentations on Zoom is not your skill set, right? So now this person is also extremely worried that, my skill set accumulated over the last 30 years comes to mean nothing now, and I could be jobless tomorrow. I think as a brand and as a marketing person, as a business custodian, you need to do everything that you can do to make both sides of the table feel comfortable. So there was a very rapid adoption of immersive digital technologies at one level, which could make the customer feel that he or she was actually in the middle of the actual physical space, and not just go through presentation slides, because that doesn't really bring anything alive. The opportunity to even make transactions online in real estate at that point of time were unheard of. Nobody would make large 5 lakh rupee deposits over an online transaction. Smaller ticket values, FMCG products, yes, all the time, but not real estate. So how do you create immersive technologies and digital gateways for consumers to actually experience the product while they are sitting in New York and you are sitting in Gurgaon? And how do you also upskill your employees, upskill your team members using digital technologies for them to be effective and acquire a new set of skills which they just never had? I think that was the brilliant and a mega challenge that all of us faced. And I think I was very happy, very proud to be a part of a certain set of leadership teams where we made this change happen. And as I told you, the result was that through COVID 1, 2, and 3, we did about 30 odd launches in less than 3 odd years. And we moved revenues from 2,500 crores to 7,500 crores.
I want to understand,
Fantastic experience. But the point I'm trying to make is that businesses need to deal with challenges both at the end of external audiences and customers. At the same time, your internal audience and your employees, because if they start feeling insecure and ill equipped, they'll never make the business happen with the outside world.
Karan, I think that was a fantastic journey through COVID, but I want to understand that was DLF, you mentioned DLF was able to launch 30 projects in 30 months, right? Was there enough demand during the COVID phase? Was there demand for housing societies, housing complexes, all of that during the COVID phase?
I think the demand for housing at a sectoral level for some parts of the COVID phase was low at a sectoral level, but for within the sector, for some individual brands, it skyrocketed. So when people were threatened about their livelihoods and whether they will have a job tomorrow, everybody wanted to save money, right? Nobody wanted to invest, especially in a dangerous or in a low trust kind of an investment product. Brands like DLF actually benefited tremendously because we had a very, very strong equity with customers, unlike a lot of other brands in the real estate space. We were not the only ones, there were a couple of others as well, but most of the sector was actually challenged. So, from a brand point of view, a brand like DLF, which had proven itself and delivered on its promises and had a glorious legacy, obviously did much better than a whole lot of other real estate brands. Second, in COVID, what also happened was to a certain set of people, they realized that we don't know if something like this is going to keep happening over and over again. If it does, and if all of us need to continue to work out of homes, then we need to spend a little extra and maybe indulge in slightly larger living
Hmm.
spaces. Because if this happens again, then every nook and corner of the house is being utilized by somebody to work out of home. You know,
Hmm.
the grandfather and the father and the mom and the aunt, everybody is trying to get hold of an extra corner in a balcony or extra corner in the puja room or extra corner in the storeroom, trying to create their own spaces. And people, especially in the first couple of phases, and phase two was really really bad. There's a lot of deaths that happened in COVID phase two. People realize that in such a fatalistic kind of an environment, instead of making our monies just lie in fixed deposits, why don't we use that money to buy for ourselves a little bit more of happy living space? And therefore that gave a fillip to real estate in certain categories as a second point. The third point, and I think the most critical fundamental point, where uh, DLF outran all other brands and competitors, outscored all other brands and competitors, was that in our condominiums, we were providing exemplary services to our house owners, tenants, people who were staying with us, making them available as many conveniences as much as possible, while the rest of the world outside our gates was in a complete state of lockdown. So we did
Hmm.
tie-ups with various grocery providers, and now it seems like a distant past. But please don't forget, in the first COVID, people didn't know whether they will get their bread, milk, eggs, or not.
Hmm.
People used to queue up and try and hoard bread and milk and eggs. Now we got into tie-ups with grocery providers to ensure that our homeowners, our tenants, were taken care of through exclusive distribution relationships. We ensured that we had a whole lot of ambulances, doctors, medical services available on campus, so that if the patients were to need, or if the residents were to need some requirements, they don't have to go out of the compound or the complex. We actually housed a whole lot of staff on campus, because again, go back to COVID phase one, there's a complete lockdown. Migrant workers, blue collared workers are going back to their villages and homes. So we housed people on campus, took care of their food and other requirements, to ensure that our residents were well served and remained kind of comfortable. The kind of protocols that we put in place in terms of sanitization of common areas, sanitization of elevators, elevator panels, sanitization of packages coming in, was unheard of. And therefore, people who were not living in condominiums, let's say people who were living in the farmhouses on the outskirts of Delhi, suddenly realized that, if I'm living in a farmhouse, I have no one to take care of me. God forbid if something was to go wrong. If
Hmm.
I was to live in a condominium, and for the first time in my life I was to live in a condominium, at least I will be well taken care of, whether it's about food or medical help or whatever other services are there. So that phase also saw a lot of first time condominium buyers coming into the residential real estate segment as well. And DLF, with its very robust portfolio of luxury and super luxury products, obviously attracted the bulk of those kind of movements that were happening in the sector. So if you put these three together, an extremely credible brand combined with people who were looking for a little extra space as much as they could afford, rather than have their monies rest in safe deposits or savings accounts, and combined with the kind of exemplary service the brand provided, made a lot of people either upgrade to bigger spaces or to move into condominium living for the first time in their life.
I think the world that you're mentioning inside DLF spaces, it looks very different from the rest of the world outside these spaces, especially
Indeed.
during the COVID days.
Indeed, and that is where I want to draw upon the point of marketing not being limited only to brand communications. Taking care of your customers is as much a part of marketing and brand operations as it is to create a communication campaign. So a lot of times people confuse marketing with brand comms. Marketing is not only brand comms. Marketing is making a promise to your customer, delivering on that promise, ideally a little extra on the promise that you made, and to build that relationship of trust, which can ensure referrals, repeat purchases, so on and so forth. So for me, all of this is also as much a part of marketing as it was, a part of core operations that were taking place at that point of time.
Got it, got it. But apart from the contrast that we just talked about, I just also want to talk about another contrast, right? You mentioned that DLF had a lot of trust in the industry, while a lot of other players were, say, struggling with trust, right? And not exactly struggling with. I think I'll say that mistrust was well found and had its own reasons. But why do you think so? Why do you think what is the difference there? Why do you think a lot of other providers were dealing with a lot of mistrust?
In a simple one word, which is a Hindi word, it's called niyat. If the owners of the company and if the promoters of the company have the right niyat, have the right vision, have the right intent, everything else will fall in place. A lot of people across various industries, including in not just real estate but also healthcare, and healthcare is an industry that I'm currently part of. I said in the beginning of this conversation, make false, hyperbolic promises. अगर नियत ठीक नहीं है, if your intent is not clear, if your intent is only to make short term profits by making a monkey out of the customer, you may do it once or twice, but you will ultimately fall flat on your faces, because no customer, no audience, and audience customers, people like you and me, we can't be fooled forever, right? अगर नियत ठीक है तो आपकी नीति भी ठीक रहेगी, which means that if your intent is right, then your strategy will follow. So strategy of any organization, and for that matter any brand, is derived out of the intent or the vision that drives that organization or the brand. And in the case of DLF and the real estate market, or for that matter, where I am right now, art fertility clinics, and as a subset of the overall healthcare space, I think it's imperative that brands take great responsibility of the commitments and the promises that they make. If anything, they should under promise and over deliver, and never the other way around. I have seen across 20 odd years, or a little more than 20 odd years of my professional experience, brands doing the opposite. They overcommit because it's fashionable, it sounds good, it's of great shock value to overcommit, and they underdeliver. Now, you can get away with it once or twice, but if you want to build a sustainable, profitable franchise, you will fall flat on your face, right? Healthcare is the other place, because healthcare is got to do with personal health. Nothing becomes more important than your own personal health and well-being, right? There are elective procedures and then there are non-elective procedures, but the last thing that you want anybody to play with is making false commitments or false promises about your health or your medical treatment or your treatment protocol, right? So honesty and integrity is extremely important in this space, and of course in real estate. And real estate unfortunately has had too many examples of a lot of rogue developers who made promises that they just could not keep. And I think that's where the fundamental difference comes in, because as I said, in a lower ticket value, and I'm not saying that a brand can be pardoned, but I'm saying if you're selling a 5 rupee product or a 10 rupee product, one of the chips in the bag of chips is slightly burnt or over fried, you may still excuse the brand and the product, because all the
Yeah.
other chips in that bag of chips are fine. So one or two out of 20 chips is fine. But that's not the kind of chance that you can take on high ticket value products, or for that matter, products and services which are intrinsic to a person's health, well being, peace of mind. Real estate, we know, is extremely high ticket values. It is the kind of portfolio I used to deal with. And healthcare, you would never ever want to, you know, almost put your life in the hands of a doctor or in a clinic, which either overcommits or has had very poor track record of past treatments. I think that's where the fundamental difference is.
Can you give me a current example of a fair commitment and high on delivery kind of a model that you have seen in, say, healthcare or at art fertility?
We've been very, very clear in the kind of commitments we make with regard to the pregnancy rates that we achieve. Now, in the fertility space, almost every clinic uh, talks about its success rates or pregnancy rates. Unfortunately, a lot of clinics in India and abroad don't have audited numbers, certainly don't have independently third party audited numbers. And they just about go about claiming whatever they want to claim. Right? Neither do they define the process through which the success rate has been calculated. Right? Now, in our case, we deliver amongst the highest pregnancy success rates in the world, amongst the highest in the world, right? We take this, with a great sense of responsibility because everything that we claim, we have third-party audits vindicating that data, and the data is transparently made available to anybody who wants to have a look at the data at any point of time. Secondly, I think all of us at some level have experience with real estate. We go to a doctor expecting a certain set of tests to happen, and then there are, unfortunately, not in all cases, but in most cases, there is an extra test and an extra test and an extra test that happens, right? And very often, when you're a patient, lying on the table, you don't have an option. You go ahead with anything and everything that's thrown at you. In our cases, our commitment to no superfluous testing, no hidden costs, complete transparency of your treatment protocol right at the beginning of your treatment, a complete and highly accurate estimate of what that treatment is going to cost. I think all of those things are core to our clinical practice. Yeah, it's fundamental to our belief, and that's why I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's imperative that through honesty and authenticity you earn trust, because this is one space where if you do not earn trust, everybody will always view a brand in a very skeptical kind of a manner. Yeah, I think that's fundamental to what we do here. And that's also actually fundamental to what we did at real estate in DLF. Also fundamental to what we did in Fab India. And Fab India is a very different organization where we were connecting the rural artisan or the rural craft producer with the urban audience in the urban cities, right? Uh, Fair pay, fair pricing, making the craft producer in some manner a stakeholder in the overall organization were extremely fundamental edifices on which that business was built. So I'm saying, to come back to what you asked, it's extremely important that you make very, very strongly, um, very strongly clear promises on what you want to deliver, and uphold on that delivery, uphold on that promise, and over deliver rather than under deliver on promises that you make.
So, Karan, I think right from the beginning, we have been talking about a consistent thread, which is trust, right? And it seems very intuitive. It seems very intuitive that trust should be a part of every organization, every company. But why do you think so many companies, so many franchises, they fail at building that trust? Why do you think so many companies again and again go back to, say, malpractices and probably things that eventually lead to mistrust?
I think, in the hope of making quick money and in the hope of getting away with it, in the hope of not investing adequately at the back end, which will ensure a certain product and service delivery, a quality of certain product and service delivery, and shortchanging the customers. I think if you're fundamentally an organization which is set for itself a long term goal of being relevant and preferred as a brand over decades to come, you need to invest in a relationship with the audiences. And that investment has to be anchored in authenticity, truth, honesty, transparency. I think a lot of people, a lot of brands, uh, and don't get me wrong, but a lot of brands that I've seen come up, a lot of businesses that I have seen come up in the last 10 years have almost come up from the point of view of getting massive valuations to take place across various series of fundings,
Mhm.
not necessarily in knowing whether they will last the next 50 years of their business life cycle. And not all of them, I repeat, not all of them, but I have seen some of these brands have a very short term view on
Mm.
how what they need to do to get there. At 10 years ago, the most fashionable term was GMV. Thankfully it's changed now, but 10 years ago it was GMV, to get their valuations up for the short term. Now, I'm not limiting this only to digital D2C startup brands at all. There are a lot of other brands which are not digital, not D2C, not startup brands, a lot of other businesses which too have also not had a long term view of being in business with a certain set of customers. And they have had a very month to month or very quarter se quarter tak kind of an approach, right? When that happens, you do not make adequate investments in your core product, services, and the delivery mechanisms. And when that does not happen, the audience or the end customer will get let down either by the product or by the service or in the manner in which it was delivered to him or her. Yeah. But I think the motivation there is not to have a 50-year view at all or a 100-year view at all. The motivation there is to have a 6 months, 1 year, at max a 5 year view of how you can make as much money as you can make. One of the first things that, and one of the happiest, one of the most fortunate things that happened to my life while I was in ITC is I saw ITC celebrate its 100 years.
Mhm.
And the passion with which 100 years of being an organization was celebrated, goes on to tell a story which very few people, very few organizations in India celebrate 100 years of being around, right? But what does it take to be a successful organization for more than 100 years? There is a certain unwavering commitment to quality and building trust. And I'm so grateful that when I started my professional journey, I was part of such an organization where the basics of customer relationships or customer engagement, the principles that should guide that, were so clearly etched in stone. You do not make a wrong promise. You do not make a false promise. You need to ensure that the stakeholder value is delivered, never at the cost of customer value, but customer is to be considered as one of your most important stakeholder, right?
Mm.
uh, there's this entire concept of triple bottom line, where customers, audiences, the environment, stakeholders at large, everybody had to be taken on board. What I'm saying is that right from my early years, I got this lesson that businesses and brands need to be built to last over generations, maybe last over lifetimes. Right? And the only way of doing that is to fundamentally be honest, truthful, and fundamentally invest in getting your product, service, and delivery mechanism right. Not worrying about what's going to happen over the next quarter or the next 2 years or the next 3 years. When people do that or brands do that, unfortunately, they make quick money or can make quick money, but the life cycles of those brands and those businesses invariably are extremely limited and shortened.
Mm. I think one of the core principles that I learned over last multiple startups, multiple companies that I've been trying to build is that think in terms of decade, where you would be a decade from now rather than where you would be 6 months or a year from now. I think, Veda, you want to come back to present times, and you have had you began your career back in 2001, right? When there was no digital marketing, online presence, and definitely no tools like ChatGPT, right? What are the various marketing trends that you've seen in the last 2 decades?
Uh, Digital marketing, social marketing was not known back in 2001. People are just
Hmm.
about started to hear those words. Uh, Orkut, I don't know if you remember. Maybe you don't belong to that generation.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. But I'm
No,
just
no,
just
yeah, I
word
remember
of it.
Akut.
But Orkut was the closest anything came to digital marketing or social media, right? Nothing really even beyond that. You're right. I have been through a tumultuous phase, and I, at some level, feel very proud to say that I have been leading changes in digital and the social spaces across all the companies that I've been working with. Um, Received a lot of decorations and awards and accolades, most grateful for. But I've always wanted to be ahead on that curve, being at the vanguard rather than being at the laggard end of that curve. I think digital, social, which eventually then moved on to content creation, content publishing, content
Mhm.
performance, which eventually then also segued into performance marketing, where one started looking at PPC campaigns, one started looking at display campaigns versus ad campaigns, behavioral targeting versus contextual targeting, got into things like SEO, who nobody had heard of 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Everybody knew website, but nobody knew what was the definition of a good website, especially from a discoverability point of view, which is where SEO comes in fundamentally. So I think some of these journeys have been incredible journeys over the last, honestly, 15 odd years. Yeah. And I think one sees a great deal of maturity that's happened in this kind of space. The other journeys that I've been a part of and I've been very proud to lead are journeys which relate to uh, rewards and loyalty programs.
Mhm.
Uh, Whether it was at ITC, when at Will's Lifestyle and ITC hotels, we had Club ITC, which is a reward and loyalty program, or me
Mhm.
creating the first ever reward and loyalty program at Fab India. Uh, I think that was another that's been I think another important hallmark in the last 15 years of how
And
marketing is.
what was the royalty program at Five India?
The Fab India loyalty program.
Yeah, yeah.
So the Fab India loyalty program was called the Fab Family,
Mhm.
and the transaction currency was Fab Coins. And to build that from scratch into something which is now contributing, which I last heard was contributing between 35 to 40% of revenue, was a phenomenal achievement right from scratch. So that's the other
Okay,
aspect I think
that's
of
awesome.
marketing, of marketing that I think one's kind of seen mature over a period of time. The third part about marketing that I've been a part of and I feel very proud of was, people don't talk about it now because it's no longer fashionable, but I promise you, till about 5 years ago, it was very fashionable. It was called omni-channel commerce,
Mhm.
right? So now omni-channel commerce has moved into D2C brands and physical retail brands. But the ability to have e-commerce in a truly omni-channel manner and drive business through a combination of retail and online space, integrating inventories at the background, consolidating inventories in the background, consolidating warehousing, consolidating shipping procedures in the background, I think has been another extremely important and exciting part of what I've done. And I've seen that as one huge change vis-a-vis, let's say, when I joined this industry 22 years ago. 22 years ago, nobody had heard about e-commerce. Forget omni-channel
Mhm.
commerce, right? So that's another interesting aspect which is there. And then there are some more, and then there are some more, quite honestly. But yeah, it's last 20 years have been an incredible decade, and I think the space continues to evolve every day. I think the space in terms of engagement through immersive experiences. I briefly mentioned that in the DLF phase, where you could make a person sit in his home and visualize
Mm.
and make a person part of AR and VR reality in making what. Now, that's something like that does not had not existed 15 years ago at all. It started to come on board, and I think COVID, in a certain ways, played that role of an incredible catalyst in trying to get these technologies to reach a certain level of fruition much faster. The same with digital payments and the entire economy based on digital payments. And we started using digital payments in real estate, for example, right in the middle of COVID. Multiple other use cases, but I'm saying from my own point of view, digital payments became an integral part of what we were doing with real estate during COVID. So AI now is the latest frontier. Exciting, tremendously exciting. Uh, Long language or long length algorithms, long length models, various names to it, uh, are not just the future but are an integral part of the present. I think what's important is for two things to happen. One, for nobody to fight it. Everybody needs to know how to embrace this, because if you embrace, you will increase your productivity and your business's productivity. There is absolutely no doubt about that. So let's not, get insecure about the entire thing and try and figure out ways of how to oppose it. That's just plain stupid, right?
I think
Figure
I
out
think
how.
Karan, that is something that I wanted to ask you as well. Do you think which is very I think a question that is being discussed a lot these days, which is will AI replace humans and then jobs thereafter?
No, AI. See, the thing is that with every tectonic shift in technology, or technology computing or computing tools, right? Uh, Existing work processes will get modified. They will change. They will have to adapt. They will need to evolve, right? Uh, Imagine the non-internet era and the internet era. Imagine an era where the bike khata was maintained over kagas and pencil versus when the bike khata started getting maintained on Excel sheets, right? Imagine when there was no email versus when email happened. Imagine when fax was the fastest way of getting a message across, versus now nobody even talk. So I'm saying with every shift that happens at any given point of time in any particular decade, the existing work processes will need to change, will need to evolve, will need to adapt. When work processes change, skill sets will need to change. Skill sets will need to evolve. Now, there's no point being goddamn stupid about it and feeling insecure about that. Instead of that, what you need to understand is brace the reality and start improving your skill sets. Now, you don't want to improve your skill sets, you will become outdated. You will become outdated, you will lose your job. But then don't blame AI for that. Blame your own resistance, blame your own inertia, blame your own laziness for you to get out of job. Please don't blame AI for that, right? When
Hmm.
when the Baikata moved from the Pothi with the pencil and the kagas to the Excel sheet, now somebody had to learn how to use MS Excel, right? You don't want to learn how to use MS Excel, you want to be bullheaded about it, and you want to be obstinate about it, you will lose your job. But don't blame the technology for that. You blame your own attitude for that. You blame your own inertia and resistance for that. So will the nature of jobs change? The answer is yes. Will that mean that your skill sets need to change and evolve? Do you need to train yourself and learn new things? The answer is yes. But my friend, that's the fundamental basis of us as human beings, as a civilization. The only way you will pass through millions of years is by evolving and changing. Now, you don't want to do that, and you want to hold on to what you already have and not want to learn something new, then blaming technology is not the right thing to do at all. You got it all completely wrong. I don't think jobs will be lost. Jobs, people will have to retrain themselves for sure. Now, okay, there are some places where there might be an immediate impact. Copywriting, for example,
Mhm.
illustration of images and pictures, for example. There will be an there will be an immediate impact on something like that. I'm just giving two particular. But tell me, when robotic surgery came in, did that mean ever that we have done away with human surgeons?
Hmm.
Have we done away with human surgeons just because robotic surgery came in? The answer is no. Did the human surgeons now have to train themselves to on robotic surgery? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Now,
Yep.
if the
Yep.
surgeon did not want to train himself or herself on robotic surgery, obviously that surgeon would feel out of dated and antiquated. So honestly, Pritesh, to me, I think it's not about blaming the technology. It's about understanding what that technology can potentially bring to you to improve your personal productivity and to improve your business productivity. How can that help you do better, healthier business for the sake of your customer? Embrace that and modify, evolve your skill sets. If you do that, I think you're in a good space. If you don't do that, you are not in a good space. But then if you're not in a good space, don't blame technology for it. Blame your own stubbornness and inertia for it. I think I made the most
I think
compelling argument for AI ever.
I think historically also looking at technology has always created more jobs than it has taken away. Be it the internet, be it the laptops and the MacBook, or be it the phones. Right? It has always created more jobs than it has taken away. It is all upon humans and people in these roles now to adapt to these jobs and the new
I think
opportunities that are
technology
coming up.
has always been a great incubator for doing two things. One is increasing the number of transactions and increasing the speed of transactions. The
Mhm.
third aspect is increasing the quality of transaction. So quality of transactions, number of transactions, and speed of transactions, or quality of procedures, number of procedures, and speed of procedures. Technology has always been an enabler for these three aspects. By and large, in my
Mhm.
headspace as I see it, now the interpretation of this will change from one industry to another, but very
Mhm.
often and when I say increase the number, by number in most cases it increases the number by making the core product and service more affordable, more easily
Mhm.
available, more easily accessible, right? For me,
Mhm.
technology performs those critical roles. Uh, and as we evolve as a human race, we should be happy and proud that we are able to give birth to newer, better, and more forward-looking technologies. If anything, we should be very proud of that and embrace that as our victory. It's actually an ode to our creative genius. People who created long language algorithms or long language models uh, were people who created this, right? We should take credit for that. We should feel happy for that.
Mhm.
uh, it's not being thrust on us by an alien race from a planet that we don't identify, but instead of taking pride in that and building on that pride and preparing ourselves to deliver the next best, there are some of us who choose to see the negative side of it and start feeling threatened about it, and that's where it all goes wrong.
Yep. Yep. I think I want to, Karan, from that point, I want to come back to your experiences and I want to just quickly have a understanding from you. You have worked across multiple areas and industries. Where did you enjoy working the most?
Where did I enjoy it the most?
Yeah, where did you personally enjoy working the most in?
Oh, everyone, every single place. When I stopped enjoying, I left. That's, no, that's not entirely true. I, I've enjoyed the challenge of thriving in environments in which I haven't worked in the past.
Mhm.
Okay. Uh, when I was with ITC for 16 years, when I moved to packaged foods for the first time, I enjoyed that thrill because I'd never experienced working in packaged foods earlier. From packaged foods, I moved into an industry completely unrelated, which was notebooks, paper stationery, geometry boxes, coloring pencils. Enjoyed that thrill tremendously because, again, it was a new sector, new category, new industry, and not done it in the past. From there, moved into retailing and fashion retailing. I started doing things like Will's Lifestyle, John Players, Will's India Fashion Week. I don't know if you've heard of that
Mhm.
in your growing up years, quote unquote. Managing something which was the largest fashion celebration in Asia, thoroughly enjoyed that. From that, moved into Fab India, where I was selling clothes. Clothes is something that I'd sold earlier with Bill's Lives and John Players as well. But I started selling and understanding and marketing furniture, furnishings, upholsteries, organic food, um, organic supplements, Never had I done something like this in the past. Tremendously enjoyed that part. After that, real estate. I had no clue about real estate, right? Never in my 18, 20 years preceding to joining DLF had any clue about that. It threw me in the middle of a completely unknown area. Uh, and boy, I tell you, it's one of the best times that I've had in my life. Just battling something about which I had not known anything when I joined it, and coming out as well as we came out as a team. And now healthcare. I had no clue about healthcare. I certainly had no clue about fertility or reproductive health or fertility in fertility management, right? But I think, to cut the long story short, I have always thrived in areas where I have not known anything in the past. What that's done is every 3 to 4 years, 2 to 3 years, it's made me roll up my sleeves all over again and begin from scratch
Hmm.
and become a student or a management trainee all over again, going back 20 years. And then harnessing some of the things that I have at the back of my head, some of the experiences of what I've done in the past, and see if some of them can be brought together to work in this new environment, or
Hmm.
unlearn completely and start relearning the realities of that new landscape, right? So I have done roti, I have done kapada, I have done makan. I have done roti, I have done kapada, I have done makan. Now I'm into children and families. And each one of these have been incredibly different spaces. Most of them have been spaces I've done for the first time and done reasonably well. That's where the real happiness and the excitement has been. It's not a particular role or a particular product line or a particular category, if you know what I mean.
I think on that note, you have touched upon humans' all social and materialistic needs.
You
I
absolutely.
think I,
Absolutely.
Karan, I think over all of this 2022 years of working at various companies, you have won tons of awards and achievements, right? Are there any particular achievements or milestones in your life that you're especially proud of, and what do they mean to you?
I have to say that, the first thing that always you remember is probably the first award you ever won in your life, right?
Mhm.
So back 15 years ago, when I got an award for one of my campaigns, um, the first award was always special, right? Because it was the
Mhm.
best performing TV campaign we did for classmate notebooks. Before that, we done an excellent TV campaign for Minto Fresh. I don't know if you've seen that, but
Mhm.
"Chaliya ko karna ho impress, to khao Minto Fresh" was the headline for that. Classmate notebooks was a very very close second campaign that followed. I think there's a certain
What
nostalgic
was the
value.
campaign? What was the classmate campaign?
Classmate campaign was be the first, follow your
Mhm.
heart and be the first. So if you were to go through some of the archives on Classmate, I'm more than happy to share them with you. In a world where every student was being, or every child was being compared as the next so and so, the next Einstein, the next Tendulkar, the next Muhammad Ali, why can't we celebrate the child for who he or she is as the first somebody? Why does Pritesh have to be the next, whoever the best podcaster in your line of work is? Why
Mhm.
shouldn't Pritesh be celebrated as the first guy who did something and has uniquely done it in the way he's done it? So it was all about establishing respect for the individual identity of a child, and the underlying premise was that every child is born unique. Every child is not born to score 100 out of 100 on maths. Every child is not born to score 100 out of 100 on history. Every child is not born to score 100 out of 100 on geometry, right? Can we, for God's sake, understand what is the natural gift the child has been born with? And instead of trying to mold him or her into fit another kind of a mold, can we encourage as parents, as teachers, in making that child or helping that child become the best at what he or she fundamentally, intrinsically has been born with, or has a passion about, or feels strongly about. And we did this
Mhm.
major campaign called Follow Your Heart, which we did lots of road shows with a couple of people at that point of time. I remember Soha Ali Khan was one, Shivani Dandekar, I think, Juhi was another one. We worked with a couple of people, female sports celebrities. I remember Deepika Palikal at that point of time was one. Uh,
Mhm.
so on and so forth. But the idea was to, tell students, tell teachers and parents that, for God's sake, don't try and put every child into a standard mold, and let that child bloom and blossom into what that child, has his heart on, or has his or her heart on, and encourage that. Very, very successful campaign. Got a lot of, got a lot of critical acclaim, because everybody else in the stationary space was talking about एग्जाम में 100% मार्क्स आएंगे अगर आप हमारी पेंसिल इस्तेमाल करेंगे. यू विल मैक्स योर एग्जाम्स अगर आपने हमारे पेन से लिखा अपना एग्जाम. अगर आपने ये नोटबुक पे नहीं लिखा और किसी और नोटबुक पे लिखा, तो रात को आपको वाहियात सपने आएंगे. यू विल गेट नाइटमेयर्स and you will not be able to. So everybody was, I was abhorred by the fact that, this is the kind of language of fear that you are fostering on a set of people, on a set of kids who are, in the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 year olds. What were brands even thinking about, when they were taking down this thing of perpetuating a fear psychosis? I think it was ridiculous. I think it was just, I was just outraged, and therefore we thought of what is it. We don't want to be another stationery brand saying कि हमारे पेन से लिखिए आप ज़्यादा लिखेंगे, हमारे पेन से लिखिए आपके नंबर ज़्यादा आएंगे, हमारे पेन से लिखिए आप एग्जाम में पास हो जाएंगे, नहीं तो आप फेलियर हैं, नहीं तो आपको नींद नहीं है. That was ridiculous. And therefore, as a response to that, we created this campaign about celebrating every child's potential, and how, as a community of parents and teachers, we can support children realizing their dreams. Did a series of ads, got a couple of awards. So, to cut a long story short, I seem to be doing a lot of long stories today. But to cut a long story short, the first couple of awards that you won are always extra special, from a certain nostalgia value. And then I think I've worked with some excellent teams, both internally as well as externally, with agency partners. And together we've done some, shall I say, with modesty, some good work, for which, yes, I have received quite a few awards and recognitions, and quite a few chairs on various adjudication bodies. But, Pritesh, and I'm not saying this because it's a cliche and it's a good thing to say, nobody does anything alone. Everybody does this together. Yeah, you could lead certain thoughts and you could chair certain actions, but you always work with teams.
Hmm.
So I think all the awards and celebrations and the accolades that I won is as much a achievement of the teams that I work with.
Got it. I think kudos to that, Karan. But I just want to, since we're talking about nightmares and campaigns, I want to understand what has been your biggest nightmare campaign or the most painful campaign that you've run over multiple decades now.
Not a single one. I'm not run. No, I've not run. And I say this with a certain sense of responsibility and a certain sense of pride. I'm not being modest here, but not a single one. I think you need to think through campaigns, for creating and running campaigns for the right reasons. As I said, if you run a campaign just for social impact, but you don't fundamentally believe in those campaigns, you
Mhm.
know, I've seen some brands do that, and then some brands quickly pulling them back when they've faced an outcry from people at large. Right? If you feel strongly about it, you should not pull them back. And those adverse reactions is something that you should have anticipated when you were creating those campaigns. So either you have the capacity to deal with the effect of what you will end up creating, or you don't create those things, right? And secondly, I think the worst nightmare would be if you were to create a campaign which promises something which is not true, where you are promising a lie. If that oxymoron can exist, if you're going to promise a lie, at some point of time you will get caught, and at some point of time you'll have to pay for it. Every brand that I worked with, every business that I worked with, every team that I worked with, I've been ruthless with everybody internally and externally, saying that we will never ever claim anything that either we can't over deliver on, or we don't 100% believe in ourselves. And therefore, thankfully, for that reason, I've not run a single campaign out of hundreds that I've run. I've not run a single campaign where it's come back to either haunt me or to bite me or to in any way negatively impact the business that I've run.
I think that has been a lovely, lovely discussion, Karan. I think I learned tons of things from you. I think I learned the value of trust and fairness in running communications and campaigns. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for coming on the show, Karan. And one last bit, Karan, that I want to understand is, let's say our audience wants to reach out to you. What would be the best way to reach out to you?
Reach out to me
LinkedIn,
on
Twitter?
LinkedIn. Yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to reach out to me. I'm usually fairly active on that platform, so reach out to me anytime.
Thank you for coming on the show, Karan. If you enjoyed this, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe and share your thoughts, reviews, and the guests you want. And आपको हमारे community के लिए links मिल जाएंगे notes में. Should join for brilliant networking and participate in the upcoming events and for connecting with the podcast guests. दोबारा मिलते हैं next discussion में.